Welcome to Training 2 of the Heal Lab STATA Trainings. So the objective for this training is to help you learn how to clean data. And we'll do that through two different objectives. First is learning how to use conditional statements. And the second is by manipulating data by generating and replacing variables. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up my do file right here. And anytime I start a do file, I'm going to add some type of thing on the top to let me know what it is that I'm doing. So this is training 2 do file. All right, so just something here to keep me noted what I'm doing. I'm going to add a date. This is on May 26th, 2021. So there we go with the date, and now I'm ready to do the do file. So the first thing I want to do is to be able to change my directory to where the data is located. So if I open up, here's my folders for training 2. So I have data, do file, output, videos, and then different things here. So I want to turn to where my data is located. And now that I have that, I'm just going to click on this, and here is the complete path to that folder. And so now I can change my data, my pathway there, change my directory there. And now I am ready to import the data set. So for this, we're going to use training 2 data, which comes from the American Community Survey. So notice that as I'm looking here, there's spaces in here. Now that's a really bad convention to get in the habit of having spaces in your data set names. But I can address for that by using quotation marks, training 2 data. And it's already in a data format, so I don't need a .dta, and I clear. Now I load this, and now I have that data set loaded up right away. So now we are good to go. So let's first look at our first objective, and that is conditional statements. And so I look at conditional statements. If I were to just type in here tab or help tabulate, that's going to bring up this help here. Now if I click on this first one, this is going to show me the syntax of a variable of this variable tabulate. Notice that it has tabulate, variable name, and it has this if right here. This if allows us to use conditional statements. So I can tabulate, I can summarize if certain conditions are met. And so that's where that shows up here, and this is done before the comma options. All right, so let's look at our do file right here. The first thing we want to be able to do is to use the if statement. Okay, so I might say here, use an if statement. Oh, even before that, maybe I'll say here, do something like this. Again, asterisks are a way to comment. Here is objective 1, conditional statements. And again, I'm just trying to keep this notated, maybe make it look a little clean, do it your way to see what you're going to do. So I want to use an if statement. So here I might do sum earnings if, now I want to look if gender, if it's male. So if male equals 1. And so by running it here, this will now run this conditional statement of earnings for those that are men. So earnings for those that are men are on average about $49,000. Now I can come back to my do file and do that same thing, sum earnings, if I want to find it for women, if male equals 0. I don't need to create a variable for female. I can just look at when male is 0. All right, and so that's where we can look at this, and now I run that, and now I have both using the if statements with the summary command for male and female. Well, now I can look at something that might be both an if statement and an and statement. All right, so if I come here, now I might say use and statement. So I might want to and say, and this is, I might want to look to see the average hours worked for males that are business majors. So notice that this is going to ask for if they're male and business majors. Okay, so I might indent these just a little to keep it looking nice. I can do some hours if, now I have these two statements. So if male equals 1, and, so this is how we do and, major equals business. Now, the reason I use two equal signs here is because if the variable already exists, like male does, then I'm just conditioning it on an existing variable. So I'll use it here. The reason I use a number here is male is a byte variable, meaning it's has number as outcomes, and this is a string variable, meaning it has words. So therefore I have to put in quotation marks the actual outcome. And so I can do this, and I run this, and now here is the average hours worked for those who are male and business majors. Right? So this is a way that we can use an if statement. Now let's suppose if and an. Let's suppose I want to use an or statement. And so that might be coming from something like the average hours worked for married men. Or rather, not married men, that would be an and, for those who are men or those who are married. So it's one or the other. So I do some hours if married equals 1. And now this straight up and down bar is the key right above the enter. And male equals 1. And now I can run that, and this will tell me those that average hours worked for those that are married or those that are male. So this might have married females in there also. And so that's how we can do some commands with if and or. Right? Now you might want to say, well, let's start doing more than just summary commands. Right? Let's do what we might call conditional tabulations. So let's look at the distribution or the tab of different variables based on certain conditions. So here I can do tab age if education is greater than 12. So let's look at those. What's the average age of the data set of those people with at least 12 years of education, or with more than 12 years of education, those who maybe have some college, right? Well, maybe I don't want to tabulate. Maybe I just want to count how many there are. What's the number? So I can do count if education is greater than 12. So I can do both of these. And so when I look at this tabulation, here is the total tabulation with those of the age of those with at least with more than 12 years of education. There's 2,554 of those. By doing count if education is greater than 12, I also get that same number. So these are ways to check when I'm looking at count. Well, maybe I want to look at, so that's conditional tabulation. Here is a conditional count. So maybe I want to use a conditional sum. Right, so I might want to say sum earnings if major equals business, right? And so I could do something like this. But what if I want to say, well, I don't want to look at business majors. I want to look at those that are not business majors. Well, I could do sum earnings if major tilde equals business. So here is a way to summarize statistics for those that are not business majors. So here are business majors expected earnings, and here are non-business majors expected earnings. And so these are different ways that you can do conditional statements. Okay, so now let's go to our second objective. And the reason why conditional statements can be very helpful is because it can help us, when we summarize the data, we can identify errors that are in the data. So here's objective 2, manipulate the data. Okay, so the first thing we want to be able to do is to generate a new variable. Okay, so generate new variable. So one thing my kids tell me all the time is things are lit. So let's suppose that things indeed are lit. So I'm going to do generate lit equals 1. And I run this. Right? Now it doesn't tell me a whole lot what's here, but if I come to the data browser, I can see there's a new variable here, and the entire column is equal to 1 because things are lit. So that's a very easy way to do that. And we'll show in just a bit why that's an important way to generate a new variable. Okay, another way might be to generate new variable based on a function of other variables. So you might want to have, you have a variable in here called age, right? We have age. We might want to create one that's age squared. So I can generate age2 equals, now here's where I'm creating a new variable, and so therefore I have one equal sign. And this is equal to the variable age squared. And so this will create a new variable, call it age2, which will equal to the other variable times itself. Now another way I might want to do this is generate hours worked per year. So I might call this a new variable, hours year. And you can't have a space in a variable name, so I use the underscore to help me out with that. And this is just equal to the hours worked per week times the number of weeks in a year. And this will now generate a new variable accordingly. Right? So these are quick ways, and I can then run that do file. Right? And I might even then say sum age2, and I might do sum hours year. I run those variables, and this will tell me that the age squared is 2136, the average age squared, and the average number of hours worked in a year is about 1900, or almost 2000 hours. Okay, so that's how we do that, generating new variables. Well, now I might want to replace variables, and this is incredibly useful when we try to create dummy variables or binary variables that equal 1 or 0. So one thing to note, if I do tab, let's go tab gender. Okay, so let's go here first. So you have tab gender. So here I have a variable that actually is a string variable. So when I look here, so it's string. So here we have gender. The outcome is the variable value is a word. So that's why it's a string. So I can do this to create a dummy variable or a binary variable for gender. So I can do that by first doing what we did right here and generate a new variable. So generate female equals 0. So this is going to create an entire column that is equal to 0. And so now I can do replace female equals 1 if gender equals female. And so what I've done is by this generate, I've created an entire column of zeros, and then I replace those values should equal 1 if the gender of the individual is female. So that is a way to create dummy variables, and you'll find that you'll be doing that quite a bit. Okay, another might be that you want to replace missing values. So if I come here and I do tab hours, notice that some people are working way more than 80 hours a week, and there's just a few of these. I might say, well, that's just miscoded. People did not put those numbers in wrong. They meant to put 42, and instead they made a mistake and put 82. So I can code those and replace those to assume that they're missing. So I can create missing data. Okay, and so again here this is those that work more than 80 hours per week are miscoded and should be missing values. Okay, so to do that, I can simply just do replace hours equals dot. Okay, dot is the missing for a byte variable if hours is greater than 80. And now it's going to take all these numbers here and just make those disappear. Okay, so that's one way we can go about doing it. Another way is we can look at our race variable. So notice that we have a race for white, black, Hispanic, and other race. Well, let's suppose I just want one variable that when I tabulate it, it'll show me the breakdowns of the different race. Okay, I can create a single race variable. Okay, so this is, I can generate race equals, I can do quotation marks. Okay, that's going to create it missing. So it's going to be missing for all those values. Now, because I'm going to put words in here, I don't put the dot. That space there will be the missing value for a string variable. I can now do replace race equals. Now use one equal sign here because this is creating a new variable. Equals white if white equals 1. Here I use two equal signs because that variable already exists. And I can continue to replace this with accordingly race equals black if black equals 1. I can do the same for the other two categories. Replace race equals Hispanic if Hispanic equals 1. And lastly, replace race equals other race if other race equals 1. And then I can do tab race to show that I now have a variable where I tabulate it, and it'll show me the breakdown by individual categories. And so I'm taking categorical dummy variables and creating a single variable. And so those are some examples we can have for running or for manipulating data, generating and replacing data as a way to generate and create new variables to help us with our analysis. And that is the help or the conclusion of training number 2.